I never thought it would be so crazy to a point in the Western Conference where it would be so stacked to where we have to look back and we have to analyze the whole National Basketball Association and think it to ourselves. The best 16 teams in the whole league should actually go against each other to deserve to be into the playoffs. But now, since we're evaluating that situation, I know the head office of the National Basketball Association is doing the same thing. I don't know if they'll ever or when they'll put that into place. But now we have to look at the loaded Western Conference, and which really put the nail in the coffin, which I believe it did, the season prior to this with Paul George, Jimmy Butler, Melo coming to the West. But now this season, where you got LeBron James going to the Los Angeles Lakers. And now we look at the West, and every team in the Western Conference is nice. Like, they're nice. The weakest teams in the West, such as like the Suns, the Kings, the Grizzlies, I still respect them. I think the Kings are actually, they're on their way up. They made some great moves in a couple of years. I mean, I can see them make the playoffs, but I mean, it's the West, so anyone could get out. And then looking at the Suns, they have a bright future. The Grizzlies are the only team in the West, I believe. They're trying to hold on to the past and try to add some players to actually make them relevant, but I think they need to blow that up. But besides from them, the whole Western Conference is stacked. I'm talking 13, 14 teams. Good Lord. And which brings me to this video, this topic. I got two teams in the Western Conference that were in the playoffs last season, and because of acquisitions of this offseason and departures of teammates, and what will soon become, which I believe, I have two teams that were in the playoffs last year, dipping out and won't be able to make it. And for the first team I'm going to start off with, as you can see here presently, the Minnesota Timberwolves. Looking at Minnesota, why I think they won't make the playoffs. I mean, honestly, they could make the playoffs, but I don't see them pulling through. Because it's talking about the alleged rumors of Jimmy Butler. Coming around with Jimmy Butler, he has high expectations and high aspirations for this team since he has 1 year left with Andrew Wiggins and Karl Anthony Towns. Butler's in that stage of his career where he's 28 years old. Next season, he'll be 29. And he's looking at a Towns and Wiggins, which they're 21 and 22 years old. And it's a spectrum of both their careers where Jimmy Butler slightly going down in his career, but he's still a head all-star. And Karl Anthony Towns and Wiggins, they're rising up their stock. With this situation, it's an iffy one because the Wolves we expected for last season to be like a fifth seed and a second-round team. And they underperformed at the end of the second half of the season due to Jimmy Butler hurting himself. But while of his absence, Towns and Wiggins didn't have enough to where they could take this team on by themselves. And for the first 2-3 seasons of only Towns and Wiggins, we expected high expectations for these guys. And they never got to that point where they could take this team just by themselves, those two, and with their supporting cast. The year 2 seasons ago, the year prior to this one, when it was just Wiggins and Towns, we expected the playoffs, or not the playoffs, the Timberwolves to make the 8th seed and get into the playoffs with Tom Thibodeau, and they didn't. They didn't perform. I believe they got 30 or less wins. And looking at now with Jimmy Butler on this team, Jimmy understands that he's in the Western Conference, and as tough it is to make the playoffs and get further in the playoffs. There's a lot of all-stars out there, so look at yourself. Going to the East will make it easier to make all-star appearances, make the playoffs, and continue to make a playoff run, which would be a lot more formidable, less developed teams, and there's a greater chance to build something in the East. And Jimmy's looking at this opportunity with alleged rumors with Kyrie Irving of heading to the New York Knicks in 2019. Personally, I would love that move. It would be great for the NBA. New York has been irrelevant for so many years. I believe that would be a great mix with him, Kevin Knox, and Porzingis. I 100% full support. Go do that, Jimmy. But now Jimmy's in a situation where Towns and Wiggins, they're not alpha males. Jimmy Butler's an alpha male, but he doesn't have the talent of an alpha male to an extent of a superstar carrying a first option to carry it to a championship. Jimmy Butler, for a championship to occur, he has to be the second or third option, preferably the third option. But if you have a transcendent player with him, he could be a second option. But looking at this team, why I don't believe they'll make the playoffs, which I said with the Jimmy Butler situation with Wiggins and Towns, and especially a Tom Thibodeau. Now, to start off with Tom Thibodeau, his defense is overrated, that they claim. He's a defensive coordinator, which he should be for the NBA. But coming with the team, the Timberwolves last season were around 27th in defensive shares in the lower echelon of the whole NBA. So the claimed defensive coach did not even get to his team, which his alleged primary skills for himself, whatever. And now offensively, the team was so out of jumbo that they had no offensive sets. They were clogged in the paint with Taj Gibson and Karl-Anthony Towns. And then Karl-Anthony Towns he was a spot-up shooter, and he even claimed that there's no offense for the team. With Tom Thibodeau on this team and the dysfunction of the team, I don't believe the team will get far enough, because I believe in the beginning of the season, throughout the middle of the season, before All-Star break, I believe the Timberwolves will have a bad record. There could be injuries shown. There will be reports of Tom Thibodeau and Karl-Anthony Towns going back at it. And there will definitely be more rumors of Towns and Butler. And I think mentally, Jimmy Butler is just out of there if he cannot convince Towns and Wiggins for the first 10 to 20 games to get their heads straight on and see any improvement for them. Due to this, I believe, since Jimmy Butler would be on an expiring contract, the Timberwolves will ship Jimmy Butler out of there, and the team will be a mess. If I'm the Timberwolves, I want Tom Thibodeau gone. You need an offensive coach, and you got defensive coordinators as well. But you need a coach that will get into the heads of Karl-Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins, know who they are, their personalities, and convert them if necessary, or if needed, added more veterans for alpha male personalities. With that team, they need offensive sets that will fit the game of Karl-Anthony Towns and Wiggins. Because if the Timberwolves ever want to reach that 100% level of maximizing their potential to be future contenders, it all depends on Karl-Anthony Towns being that superstar player. And that's what we didn't see for last season. Jimmy Butler was their best player, and Karl-Anthony Towns in the playoffs, he got bullied out there, as you can see it. But going back, I think the Timberwolves will finish around the 10th seed. I think they'll struggle in the beginning of the season throughout to the All-Star break, which will lead to more of the tension between Jimmy Butler and others. I think the Wolves will trade Jimmy Butler off if they see if they're that behind the 500 mark and they're not going to make the playoffs because the West is stacked. And then the Timberwolves should part ways with Tom Thibodeau. And the Wolves are in a weird position, man. Wiggins and Towns could also want to leave as well. Minnesota's not an attractive place at all whatsoever. And I think, honestly, whenever they did get Jimmy Butler a year ago in the draft by trading for him, I thought it's a weird mix, because I think they should stick with Karl-Anthony Towns and Wiggins and have that young squad pushed up just more normally, more generically, naturally. But I felt the front office was like, hey, we got to win now. So I'm going to throw in Jimmy Butler. We're going to get Jeff Teague, Taj Gibson, Thibodeau, get his old Chicago Bulls guys in. And now they're in a clogged area to where they're not good enough to go further in the playoffs, but they're not bad enough to get a lottery pick to add more young talent with Towns and Wiggins. So Minnesota, I think that was a missed opportunity for this franchise to be something good. The second and last team I'm going to mention, the Portland Trailblazers. It was funny because C.J. McCollum and Kevin Durant, when they had that podcast going back together, and Katie he said to C.J. McCollum, he's like, "Hey man, y'all not making the playoffs, right?" And C.J. was like, "What are you talking about? Yeah, we like, come on, man." Oh no. Kevin Durant said, "Y'all not winning the championship," and C.J. was like, "What? Come on, man! Like, we got the team." And C.J. knew down in his heart, we're not winning it, and Katie knows that they're not going to win it. And looking at the Portland Trailblazers for the last 2 seasons, they've been eliminated in the first round. And even though they were the 3rd seed last season, the teams from 3 to around 7, that was all held by a game or a game and a half. So all the teams are in that level. And the Blazers, they got the teams they should be worried about are the Jazz, the Nuggets, the Lakers. They're not on the level of the Rockets, the Thunder, or even the Warriors, which the Warriors are ahead of everyone else. Looking at this seems like the season where everything will go to shreds, where the Blazers don't make the playoffs, and then they finally should rebuild and let go of either Damian Lillard or C.J. McCollum. This is perfect for Damian Lillard to actually get out of there and either go to the Eastern Conference and be a star there and start a super team, or just go on to a great franchise. Or if Damian Lillard could exit his way and go into Los Angeles, joining LeBron James next season, possibly with Kawhi Leonard. But this team is infatuated with terrible contracts, non-shooters, and they rely heavily on a guard game of Damian Lillard and C.J. McCollum, 2 guards that are volume-heavy shots, and that they don't really get the team moving and going along, not pass-first guys, which in the league, the point guards, a lot of high-volume shooters, but the smart ones and the ones that win championships, such as Steph Curry, get the team involved, and they know when to lower their points in the game and know when to get everyone else involved, which helps their game and their team's success. And that's something Damian Lillard needs to worry about and needs to convert next season if he wants to make this the playoffs or even challenge in the first round. Also about this team, Terry Stotts, he's a nice coach, but he doesn't do anything special, offensive sets or getting the team involved. But I did like the acquisition of Nurkic last season. He was a great player for them. Besides the new acquisition of Seth Curry, he'll be fine for the team, but when you have a lot of guard heavy from C.J. McCollum and Damian Lillard, Seth's just going to fit right in, just a high volume shoot. And just with the team, you have terrible contracts, and whenever you have the Los Angeles Lakers adding LeBron, you know they're making the playoffs. And then Denver Nuggets loading their team, which they should have made the playoffs last season, which was held by 1 game, when they had Isaiah Thomas and possibly Michael Carter Jr. coming in. And with that team, the Nuggets will ascend because they're more oriented. The Nuggets have a lot of depth, and they know their position of everyone has their role. And with the Blazers, they're just a stock going down. Looking at these 2 teams, the Blazers and the Minnesota Timberwolves, it's gonna be interesting how, if they don't make the playoffs, or I believe they don't, how they're gonna recover from this, especially with the Timberwolves. But with the Trailblazers, this will be an era of Damian Lillard and C.J. McCollum. And then with the Timberwolves, they just have to stick with their young guys, get a new coach, and see what happened. But yeah, that's my assessment for today. So I think the Lakers and the Nuggets will slide in, and then with these 2 teams, they're going to head out. But that's what happens in the Western Conference when you have